I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please. Mrs. Clark.
Trustee Bertelson,
Excused.
Trustee Black,
Here.
Trustee D,
Excused.
Trustee Lucine,
Here.
Trustee Moran.
Here.
Trustee Neal,
Here.
Trustee Reinhardt,
Here.
Trustee Wilson.
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the April 28th Bozeman School District School Board meeting. Thank you for joining us. Public comment will be taken throughout the meeting on agenda and non-agenda items. During public comment, no member of the public will be allowed to comment on contested cases, other adjudicative proceedings, or personnel matters. The public portions of this board meeting are being recorded in accordance with District Policy 1420 and Section 2-3-214 MCA. By remaining in this meeting, all participants and attendees acknowledge they may appear on the recording, which will be placed on the school district's website for a minimum of 1 year from today. Further instructions about participating will be provided throughout the meeting. Before we engage in the business of the board, I would like to share the core purpose of the Bozeman School District, which can be found on the back of our nameplates. It reads, Bozeman Public Schools exists to ensure high-level learning for all students. We will now open with agenda item 3.4, consent agenda.
I move we approve the superintendent's recommendation for 3.4.1 and 3.4.2.
Second.
Motion made by Trustee Reinhardt, seconded by Trustee Moran. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion passes 6-0.
I move we approve 3.5.1.
Second.
Motion made by Trustee Reinhardt, seconded by Trustee Moran. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion passes 5-0. Up next, 4.1.1, action item, consider approval of LRSP staff well-being measurable goal and action plan. Superintendent Bertram.
Thank you, Chair Neal. In the audience, we have some staff members that were members of the three-day consensus committee. You can come up and sit in those hot seats. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. We had 51 staff members participate in a three-day consensus process to turn the staff well-being measurable goal placeholder into a recommended goal and action plan. From left to right, David Swedman works at the Wilson Building. Kelly Hayden is at Sacagawea Middle School. Lucy McCausland is a teacher at Hawthorne Elementary, and Dana Holland is a teacher at Bozeman High. So we have all grade bands represented. I'll quickly walk through what we did, and then I really want you to hear from them on their experiences. Also, special thank you to Trustee Reinhardt and Trustee Wilson for participating in 3 days of consensus. Trustees, I sent you this draft, so I'm not going to go through all the nitty-gritty details. I'll hit some highlights. We unpacked staff data. We took the Panorama survey in the fall. A reminder, we moved away from HumanX and adopted the Panorama survey. It has been much better received. In short, that survey showed that we had our teachers, certified staff, the well-being area scored the lowest, which is items like I'm exhausted and I'm overwhelmed. When you move down to the classified and professional, their lowest scoring area was in belonging, and we spent some time during the consensus process tackling that specific piece. How do we make classified staff and professional staff, those at the Wilson and those in our school sites, feel a part of each school site team? We came to an agreement on a measurable goal. That goal reads, by 2028, BSD 7 will increase staff well-being to 85% or above as measured by the Panorama survey. That 85% is sort of an aggregate of average of those four areas. So belonging, school climate, staff leadership, and well-being. For reference, our fall baseline data was about 63% for certified staff and 67% for classified staff. So we have a ways to go to get to 85%. There's a 3-year timeline chosen. That was on purpose. Some of our other goals, as you know, are more of a 5-year plan. That 3-year implementation timeline was to give a sense of urgency on these topics. That group also decided to, or recommended that we take the panorama survey twice a year. So we have a fall data and spring data. So that just launched April 25th. It'll run through May 9th for 2 weeks, and we're providing an incentive for all buildings who meet or exceed 90%. Their name goes in a hat. We'll draw staff members out, and myself or members of my team will give them a free personal day. So I may become a teacher or a data analyst or a Spanish teacher or a custodian or who knows. God help us. Then you get to the action plan, and there's a lot of items in the action plan. I'm not going to go through all the items. I'll let them hit on any highlights they want to talk about. I will tell you that it's a lot of things to keep track of. And so we are going to, as an executive team, going to be working through who owns what in this action plan, what pieces are owned by sites, what pieces are owned by central office. We also will be folding it into the LRSP accountability framework. So when you start talking about board luncheons, you start talking about what we're communicating publicly on those LRSP implementation frameworks. District work and site-specific work around these goals will be part of that. A couple highlights I want to hit on. Some things that came up, bubbled up, as our teachers want support dealing with students with difficult behaviors, and they want support supporting students that are multilingual English learners. And so there is a need for supports and systems and ongoing professional development. They want to know me and my staff, and they want, I think, relationship building with central office, and we'll be working on how we go about doing that. They want consistent check-ins with their principals, and they want to build relationship with their principal and let them know when they're doing well and not doing well. There was some great things that I heard that also got cemented. So all of our work around multi-tiered systems of support and professional learning communities, that work is cemented in beginning to feel like it's the actual culture and climate of our schools. And so, establishing or improving fidelity and consistent application and having it look more similar than different across buildings. And then also encouraging our leaders and our guiding coalitions to differentiate that rollout. There was an acknowledgement in the room that, for example, Lucy was on the Hawthorne team, and Kelly was as well, when we were walking through that process at Hawthorne, and it was a multiple year process, and we kept getting better at it year after year. And so those changes incrementally happened over time, where the high school, we ripped a big Band-Aid and changed a whole bunch of things at once. And so being mindful of that in the rollout and having guiding coalitions and building principles differentiate, not everybody has the same end goal, but differentiating the pace and the expectations of how we're getting there. A couple other ones I wanted to, I mentioned classified sense of belonging. That was an important one. There was also, I was very appreciative in the room, an acknowledgement that there's a difference between personal well-being and professional well-being, and that there's an individual component to all of this. And so it was nice to hear staff own that part of their personal well-being is up to them to engage in wellness processes that the district might be having or that they're doing outside of school. And we also had Alyssa Pack, the wellness coordinator, in the room, which was very helpful. So she could hear some of that and how can we enhance our wellness opportunities that we're offering to staff to increase them participating in the personal wellness pieces. Other things that bubbled up is a pre-K-12 attendance committee. Attendance, you've heard it at almost every board luncheon. Our attendance rates are pretty strong and they've been consistent, but the students who do have chronic attendance issues are a challenge. And then we always have challenges with the tools we're using, whether it's the new tools at the high school for RTI scheduler and taking attendance during hawk time and prime time and how that translates to Power School. All of that we're continuing to work on. Some simple shifts, shifting substitute hours instead of 8 to 4 to 7:45 to 3:45, so they can arrive a little earlier, be prepared for the day, work with the staff that are in the building who are usually on the hook to get them up to speed on things. And so the notion being that if you're a teacher and you're gone, and the sub does a great job, when you come back, your life is easier. And so trying to increase those prevalence of you coming back to something that was awesome when you were gone. Then those were kind of K-12. When you zoom down into pre-K-5, a couple of the big items were the expectations around the Power Teacher Pro gradebook and what that looks like K-5 versus middle school and high school, and there will be some shifts that are made there. And then the impact grant. Not that we're going to blow everything up again with a new impact grant, but there were a lot of things that were talked about at the impact grant that were much more than just a schedule change. And so circling back to some of those items and also giving some clear timelines around when will we revisit K-5 prep time, or when will we revisit when PLT time happens after school or during the day. So kind of a relook at that. Middle school specific items, a couple of them that popped out are our middle schools and our high schools. You kind of see it if you go to a super PAC meeting. It's full of K-5 buildings and there's a handful of middle school or high school folks there. So the buildings get bigger and the parent participation in PACs gets smaller, which also equals kind of a disparity in the fundraising opportunities as you move up. And so trying to enhance PAC partnerships at the middle school level. And then similar, there was two things very similar at the middle school and the high school, but this concept of one Bozeman, like how same does CJ and SMS have to be? And what items do they have to be in lockstep, and what items can they have autonomy or flexibility? And the same thing at Bozeman High and Gallatin High. A lot of the high school specific recommendations, there was an acknowledgement that there was a lot of change that happened at the high school. And so some of these are articulated as recommendations to the guiding coalitions and recommendations to building leadership around hawk time, prime time expectations, student expectations and accountability for going to hawk time and prime time, whether you can use hawk time, prime time for 504 meetings, things like that. And then and a big topic at the high school is, again, that one Bozeman, knowing that we may be stifling some creativity and some expertise in buildings when you have a department at one building that wants to launch a new course. They have student interests, they have teacher interests, but because we don't have the same thing at the other high school, we've said no to some of those course proposals. So we're not looking to open this up as a big external conversation, but more of an internal conversation about what does one Bozeman really mean, and what are the areas that we have some flexibility on. Then classified and professional, continued opportunities to bring secretaries together. As you know, building secretaries do 5,000 things. Their job description is, but many of those things they do like once or twice a year. And so providing ongoing training about those topics and collaboration. And then we have a couple staff members, professional staff, who are working remotely, and we're going to be doing some policy work, procedure work around what does it mean to work remote, and what are the rules around that, and when is it appropriate and when is it not? The only other thing I'll mention is that there's a long list of items that we didn't spend time on the circle that are going to go to bargaining because they have a cost associated with them, or a likely cost associated. Classified bargaining is Thursday and Friday of this week, and certified bargaining is May 12th through 16th. And those teams, the BEA in particular, they have the longest list, will be working with their members on prioritizing some of those items. And there was a great conversation in the room and a recognition that if we say yes to any of those items that cost money, it's saying no to some other things, or saying no to percentage, percent on the base, or it'd be competing with salaries and benefits. With that, I'll be quiet, and I want you to hear from this group or from Tanya or Sandy. I guess, Mike, to kick this off, if you press the button that's on the right with the little person, it'll turn green. Then they can hear you up here. And if you just remind us who you are, talk a little bit about your experience in the circle and any key takeaways you have for personally or for your grade band.
Okay, I'm Dana Holland, and I teach Spanish at Bozeman High. Do I have to keep my finger on the button? Okay, sweet. I was like, I'm gonna feel silly if I can let go, so I should ask. It was a very unique, this is my first time participating in Consensus, and I think, judging from what other people were saying in the room, it was a very unique experience for Consensus, just that well-being is such a nebulous thing, and then all the grade bands had specific things that they needed as well, that were very different, and we learned a lot about what one another do. Also, we've got the current climate that we are in, just in terms of education, in terms of politics, local and national. So we had a lot of those kinds of things coming into the room a bit in terms of well-being. And in terms of high school, for me personally, what I hear is growing pains, essentially stretch marks, if you will, from this particular year. I serve on our guiding coalition and probably don't feel those stretches as much because I've been a part of that process. But I think that there were a lot of good things that were said and a lot of emotions and solutions and things that got into the room that just needed to be addressed so that we could continue to move forward in our PLC process.
Oh, they are. Oh, well, there you go. I'm Lucy McCausland. I teach third grade at Hawthorne. This was not my first go at Consensus, but it was definitely unique in having so many people in the room. It definitely feels like it was a lot of go slow to go fast kind of situation. There's so much sharing of feelings at the beginning but it is part of the process, and you have to get that out. So it was very interesting to have 3 days as well, but a lot of people acknowledge that having a break in between the first initial days where we kind of got all of the ick out and then started some very preliminary brainstorming for solutions, but having time to kind of sit with that and think about what we had actually discussed and whether things felt as important afterwards as they did in the moment. And I think there were a lot of benefits to having that big of a group. I think it's really easy to think that the grass is greener when you're a K-5 teacher, those high school teachers, or vice versa. And so I think it was important that we hear the stressors that are unique to each grade band, but we all have them. I think it was important to have central office admin, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Marilyn and Casey because to sit in that room and hear some of the things, they weren't easy conversations, and to be vulnerable and open to hearing the not great. I don't know that I could have walked into the room with the grace and the respect that was given back to the teachers. K-5, I think that the other big thing is just knowledge is power, and that the people in the room really walked away with understanding why decisions were made along the way and the realities of funding. A lot of teachers don't truly understand how things are funded and the really hard decisions that have to be made. And I think that Bozeman is a little behind the curve in certain things that we've kind of, some of these issues that we're dealing with, other people have been dealing with for years, and it's just all hitting us at once. And that COVID kind of slammed us with a lot of that as well. So I think a lot of people walked away feeling like they had a much better understanding of why decisions were made, and then having respect for those decisions as well. K-5 We did talk a lot. Our two main items was revisiting the impact. A lot of people in the K-5 buildings that weren't necessarily part of impact, or even the PLC committee that had been formed before that, didn't have this notion that somehow the impact is just the schedule, where we all are teaching ELA at the same time, and then we all have this time to PLC. And it's really more of a philosophy of why we are doing those things and how we deliver instruction and what those blocks are really truly meant to do for kids. And so kind of getting away from the idea that this is just a schedule, but it's really a philosophy of how we do business at the elementary world. The other one was the online grade book. It's interesting because when I had first started in the district, we actually were required to put assignments in, and then all of a sudden that kind of like went away, and now it's back. But what we've found is that in the interim, a lot of people have devised systems that work for them as far as how we track data, and biggest thing is with PLCs, we're looking at kids across the grade level. So when we're looking at data, I need to be able to see Kelly's data as well as mine, and PowerSchool doesn't currently allow us that flexibility. So a lot of teachers are maintaining 2 to 3 grade books, depending upon what their systems are in their building. So their own personal one, that's actually what they use that drives instruction. Then they were feeling like putting things into PowerSchool was just basically a double dip of that, as well as then in some buildings, we also have priority standard documents that our principals are using to pull information to make decisions through Guiding Coalition. So the ask was to pause PowerSchool requirements beyond it generating a report card. I think those were, I talked a lot, so.
I'm Kelly Hayden. I teach 8th grade math and algebra at Sacagawea. I used to teach with Lucy at Hawthorne, and Casey's my principal. So it was fun to, I guess one takeaway, it was really fun to be in the room, having worked in the district for 15 years, just to see people from all these different veins of work I've done here. So I think similar to what both Lucy and Dana said, it was really a nice opportunity to just hear how everybody's doing from classified to high school to middle school to elementary, and get a better understanding of what the stressors were. Just like you mentioned, Lucy, just after COVID and after all the changes, it's just felt like this wellness group was kind of a good landing place of like, okay, how is everybody doing with the like local politics and national politics? And, you know, some teachers expressed just feeling a little bit nervous about their profession. So it just was a great opportunity to gather and feel like we were heard. I was very appreciative of the fact that the leadership was willing to listen to what teachers had to say and be vulnerable and take some very critical feedback. And then Pat did a great job of leading the consensus. I'd been a part of one other consensus, and that was the budget cuts. And so that was like very hard because it was, you know, knowing that we were going to be delivering this news to this teachers. And so hopefully these changes, it's been, I think, powerful for those of us a part of the committee, already seeing some of these no-cost changes happening that are very simple, such as like the newsletter on a midweek. And I mean, these like little things where people are like, and you're like, I can do that. And hopefully some of the changes will make Casey's life easier and Marilyn's. But I think a big takeaway is that teachers want to feel celebrated. And I felt like that was this across the board, that these for like simple things, like, or not even simple, like national board certifications and master's degrees, and just to kind of be seen as humans working hard. And that seemed like that voice of like, we just need to be seen and heard. I don't know why teachers are so needy right now, or like, you know what I mean? But I'm like, okay, well, I guess we need to be celebrated. But it's true. I think that like people work really hard to get national boards, which is like this like incredible effort, and then they get a letter in the mail. So those are just very simple changes that I think I left feeling really heartened that, okay, like our district's, you know, has a lot of great ideas, still like really wonderful people working here. And, you know, despite all the changes, there will be some things that we can look at again. For example, the middle school block scheduling. I think for me, it's wonderful. I have 90 minutes of math, which I love. But I think for others, it's been very hard and challenging, especially elective teachers. So I think that putting here a timeline on looking at some of the block change schedules, or like what can we do best for the students, that was another thing, is I think teachers that were a part of that group and classified just really had the students' learning in mind and their well-being as well. So I think just disseminating this information so others feel as seen and heard is kind of the challenge at this point, because I think being a part of that process was really cathartic and just, I don't know, just, I guess, reflecting on the profession and how can we make it better for all. It was nice to have a few very young teachers there, but I think a big concern that was shared also is just how do we keep young teachers in the profession when the cost of living in Bozeman's so expensive, and teaching's a lot of work. It's hard. So that was something that I'm glad we're addressing, well-being and kind of this retention and how to support new teachers across all grade levels. So yeah.
I am David Swedman, and I am a professional employee here at the Wilson. I am the district's data analyst and assessment coordinator, and I represented the professional/classified group. Something that we were asked to touch on specifically during consensus was the sense of employees in this group not necessarily feeling engaged or connected to the primary purpose of the Bozeman Public School District, which is ensuring high-level learning for all students. And I think part of that, by its nature, is that these employees, including me, we're not in the classroom. We may or may not be at a school. And so the work that's done in educating our students and helping them grow and helping them learn, sometimes I think that's difficult for us to feel a part of. Perhaps we feel a part of it in the abstract. And so that's something that we discussed. I think my group, we were a bad representation, and I use the word bad because we all really value our jobs, our work here. We're happy. We're kind of hypothetically thinking about people who probably should have been in the room but weren't, and you know that's always the students who don't need extra credit, right? They're the ones who do it. So something that came up, we spoke a lot about paraprofessionals in particular, and that's because of some of the perspective that one of our group members brought to the table. And I think real or perceived, that there's this feeling of a caste system, unfortunately, at many buildings, sort of Downton Abbey, right? Upstairs, downstairs, that sort of, they're the help. And they serve a lot of those functions, but it's challenging to bring those people into the fold when they feel like outsiders. So a lot of our recommendations are focused on things that could be done to help with a sense of belonging, especially amongst paraprofessionals. For example, we don't have technology readily available for them, yet they're expected to check email or communicate electronically. So, I think in the cost section, that was something that we put forth. And then opportunities for professional development or learning. Secretaries, as Casey mentioned, for example, they do so many things. And as we all know, in education, the ground's constantly shifting. So technology changes, procedures change, and there's not always the time or the formal training to get everyone on the same page. So a lot of schools have developed their own little quirks or culture, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but for example, when we're reporting things to the state, there may have been changes in the standards that we need to get everyone aligned with. So being able to make time for those types of activities was something that we discussed. Those were really the two biggest areas. And one thing I do want to reiterate, in a world that is seemingly very reactionary and gravitating towards authoritarianism in many ways, it's pretty awesome to be part of a district, part of an organization whose leadership team is democratic, in a sense. I think one of the most underrated qualities of leadership is the ability to listen. And I can say, at least I work almost daily with the executive team here at the Wilson Building, and I can speak to them and our principals. And by and large, I think they listen, and they listen well. And I can say that I feel valued and I feel seen, and I think that's really important. So I just want to give kudos to the culture that our leaders are helping to make, and as a board, since you choose the superintendent, give you credit for the decision that you made there. And so I'm appreciative that you bring opportunities such as consensus for staff to be able to participate in. It means more than you probably think it does.
That was really great reporting. Thank you all. Are there trustee questions? Gary?
Yeah, thank you all for your participation in this. I support this 100%. I'm curious, through your discussions, when we look at the 4 categories: belonging, school climate, staff leadership, relationships, and well-being, was there any discussion of like a common conceptual definition of each one of those? Because they can have a broad spectrum of perceptions. So I'm curious if there's any way to kind of define that. So is it different in elementary than it is in middle and high school?
I can help with that one a little bit. I think that they're not, those are the overarching categories, but under each of those categories is like 16 to 20 questions. So there's so we get feedback and reporting at the district level and at the site level down to the question. So when we talk about overwhelmed and exhausted, those were 2 specific questions, and then they all kind of roll up into those general categories. So yes, we do have the ability to look at areas of celebration and areas of concern at a building level, at a district level, at a grade band level in this data.
I'm curious what each one of you feel could best be done to provide you really good well-being and belonging in the classrooms.
I think Casey has a document in front of him that might have the answer to all that. I think that's one of the things that's really, it's such a nebulous thing, and every teacher from every grade band brought in a different perspective, especially in terms of like the professional stress. Because for example, at the high school, we just use PowerSchool. We do not have the stress of having PowerSchool just be mostly the communication tool for parents, and then having our own systems that let us compare data. So for us, we were like, that's a thing that's stressing you guys out? We had no idea. So everybody's needs were so different. And then within that, when our groups got together, we're all here kind of representing our grade bands, but every individual within the grade band had very different perspectives that they brought to the table too. So like in terms of our personal, we might have things that we personally think that need to be done. But that's the nice thing about this document, is that it is the summary of what everyone believes. I honestly was a little nervous about coming today to represent high school, because I feel that my perspective is going to be so different from what a lot of people would once said. But that's what that's why it took 3 days to do this, to come to that point where we were like, okay, these are action items that certainly don't harm anything, certainly could help, and here's a bunch that don't cost anything. For me personally, in terms of the high school, I can say that I've had a really good year, and I expected this year to be a little bit tricky with all the changes. But again, I think a big thing is that communication piece. I felt a little bit more in the driver's seat being on the guiding coalition. I understood all the decisions we made and why they had to be made the way they were. I helped, we looked at all the different software that we were going to take attendance with for Hawk Time and Prime Time, and RTI is incredibly user-friendly. We could have picked something so much worse. So I was really happy with how this first year went, considering everything. But I had that big picture part of it, and I think if you don't have that, then it just feels like it's being done to you, which was a part of why we talked about I think recognition comes into this, like Kelly was mentioning that there's a lot of teachers that are working really hard to make everything we're doing successful, and I think that's why that recognition desire is so strong. They want to be seen as, like I'm doing all this stuff that's, to benefit our kids, and it feels like I'm just getting more thrown at me. So I feel like that maybe would be one of the smallest things that seem to be like no one doesn't like recognition. But in terms of one size fits all silver bullet, that was one thing we discovered in those 3 days, is that there is certainly not a silver bullet for this one.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest one, is that for every idea that was mentioned that was meaningful to one person, like half the room was like, that doesn't make a difference to me. And so that was the hardest part of all of it, is especially when it came to recognition, food became a very hot topic, whether people want food or don't want food. I'm team no. But I think a lot of it's dependent upon what your current reality is. Like for me, one of the things that was really big was having some balance between schools as far as student populations and class size and those kinds of things, because that's something that's pressing at my school. I'm looking at having a very full group of, I'm looking at having 32 third graders in my class next year because we're really full at Hawthorne. So to me, that feels like it's a big thing. Whereas at other buildings, if they aren't that full, then that's not the thing that felt big. So I think that there isn't just one. I think a big part of this does come down to balancing your personal and your professional. There are a lot of pressures coming at teachers now that didn't exist, or at least not in Bozeman 5 to 10 years ago. And so really having to check ourselves and say how much of our exhaust and overwhelm is because of the realities of the day-to-day job, or just because of the pressure we feel from society. And so to me, that's a big piece of all of this, is how do you separate those two? And if you can't, then how do you get the help that you can or that you need to be able to separate those two? So what really is within our control and what isn't? Yeah, I think I answered the question.
I don't have too much more to add, but I think one thing that stands out would be just the sense of belonging. I think another thing that we talked about is like a stronger like support network for new teachers, or if you switch, because I've done a lot of switching grades, like 7, 8, new subject, and I feel like that has been hard to feel like I'm good at it, because it's, when you're always switching to a different topic, then you're, I kind of love doing that because it's fun, but it's also hard. So I guess a sense of belonging is like having people that you have the capacity to kind of help you get you up to speed, regardless if you're a new teacher or if you're like switching subjects and things like that. So I think in how do we keep these like new teachers in the profession, I think that making them feel like they are supported and that they do have actual mentors that they can talk to and brainstorm with outside of the PLC. So I know that idea has been kind of out there, but that's something else I heard, is just just feeling like you belong in a certain spot. But I love my job, so I guess I feel happy with my year and happy with how things are going. But that's not everybody's. Not everybody feels that way, and especially just in the middle school, like maybe the 6th grade hall is having a hard time, or because it's all new teachers. So it's really dynamic. So I don't think, like you mentioned, there's not one answer to all of this. It's very personalized. So yeah.
So not being in the classroom, take my response with a grain of salt, but what I heard and what I see is teachers have the weight of the world on their shoulders. They're literally being asked to do everything. And I feel that what I heard is there's this sense of having to do everything and not knowing if, where, when they can draw boundaries, right? Parents can communicate with teachers 24/7. That's not something that used to be possible because of technology. Student behavior is changing, populations are changing, and I sort of picked up on this sense where teachers want to do a good job, but they don't necessarily feel they have the permission to establish boundaries, healthy boundaries, appropriate boundaries, and I think a lot of that is weighing on them, and I think a lot of these recommendations try to get at the root of that. I don't, yeah, okay.
Thank you. And before we move on to additional trustee questions, trustees Reinhardt and Wilson, would you like to, you're welcome to report on your thoughts on the process.
The one thing that's coming to mind to me right now that I didn't hear them share, but was really a key part of the final day for sure, was taking a look at every suggestion that was thrown into the room and thinking about who that might impact without intention. And so pulling a lever here, what would it do to the staff over here? And I think I really appreciated how well thought out that was, and just the incredible listening that was going on there, so that when somebody at the middle school would suggest this, the high school could say, I think that might impact this. And it was very rich, and I think that the items that are being proposed for the group here, for the trustees, really have weeded out the things that had unintentional consequences. And there's a few make K-5 teachers happy. There's a hit on some administrators and the ability to draw data and stuff like that. So there was just, it's not perfect, but I think I was really impressed with how well thought out all of the actions that they're recommending are.
Well, I really support everything that was, all the work that was done in those 3 days. It was wonderful to spend time with teachers, K-12 and classified and certified, and to just be in the room to listen as someone who is part of the decision-making at the end of the day for a lot of things. I have to say that one of the coolest things that I saw, and it was in day one, was there were times when we went around, we were talking about things, but the shift immediately into seeking solutions happened so fast. Instead of just, hanging out and wallowing in what is, there was this intense potential thrown out in the room, and it went into day 3 big time, And so that was really exciting to be a part of that, to just see how everybody was so there for their colleagues, for themselves, and for the kids in the room, and for the district. I'm really proud. I talk about this process that we just completed to a lot of people, and they're like, "You're kidding me, you guys did that? That's awesome, right?" And I think it's one of the most important things we can do at this time, is to invest in time of doing well-being work around for our kids and for the people who make that happen. And that includes teachers and classified and everyone, and the administrative staff, at the Wilson, everyone. And I'm just really proud that we have committed to resources, and it's in the long-range strategic plan. It is not just a survey, solutions, move on to the next thing. We're committed to this. And so I'm very, very supportive of all the work that's been done. Casey, thanks for putting this document together. It was great. And I'm ready to hit the ground running, see whatever the board can do. So.
Thank you. Melissa.
I don't have any questions. I support this so much. I have spent all weekend reading and reading and reading, and it's fantastic. It is 100% fantastic. Thank y'all for being on the committee, Tanya, Sandy, Casey, Marilyn, Pat. I mean, I probably spent 10 hours reading this. I killed probably 3 trees because I had to print it too. It's fantastic. Thank y'all. And I have 2 of my kids have had y'all as teachers, so thank y'all. Seriously, this is, and whatever we can do to help this. And I can't wait to see it be at 85%.
Kevin?
All right, well, first of all, I think the consensus process to me just continues to be a stronghold of our district and gives us the ability to communicate in a manner which is unique to a lot of different places. And I think, and part of it, like the survey is great, and I'm glad that we found one that people actually enjoy taking and will participate in. So I hope that continues. But also, because I read a lot of the comments in the survey, and I had a little PTSD going back to like getting a lot of emails during COVID. Because there's, as you guys mentioned, there's a lot of communication and pieces that go into the decisions that aren't always either, maybe it's communicated, maybe not read, or maybe it's missed, or, I mean, there's so many different things that go into communication that can become challenging when we're dealing with a lot of different people. And so to get this document out of the survey, we would have not got to this point with the survey. And so the consensus process is so valuable of actually getting everybody in the room, having conversations about the hard things. And I appreciate the process. I appreciate the ability of so many different people and the willingness just to listen, regardless, or, whether that's Casey or Maryland or the teachers that were in the room or the classified staff, like everybody's willing, that I've seen in these situations, are willing to listen and be a part of it and then communicate some of the thoughts back, and then we can actually get somewhere. So I'm appreciative that process. I do wonder a little bit about the surveys and moving forward in the future, because I hear of like, okay, right before spring break, is that the best? I'm not saying that we want to alter the surveys by any means, but right before spring break, is that a great time? I hear how exhausted people are and how kids like that week before is like, so is there any consideration on like timing of sending those out? And maybe there's just never a good time, but that was one thought I had. And then I think the other thing to touch on was just regarding, Casey, you mentioned the ownership of the document, of the recommendations, that sort of thing. Yeah. Is that something that would come back, not necessarily for board approval, but some information like, oh, we've broken this down, you're gonna do the work? Would that be something that would be, people would be able to look at and understand?
Yes, certainly. And I think that's the communication, communicating what happened in consensus is really hard, right? But for people to respect this process and be seen and heard and valued, they're going to need ongoing communication on these topics. So I think it's going to come to trustees in a variety of ways. So for example, there's some specific items that high school administration and guiding coalitions are going to be churning on. That information is probably most important for teachers at the high school, and it'll be communicated to teachers at the high school, but we'll keep you appraised of those items. There's some other items in here that are like very specific, and they're gonna need someone to like oversee them and champion them. So like K-12 attendance committee, we're gonna be having conversations, if that's Mars Mike or Patrick McClellan taking on the ownership of that process, K-12, that may need to be a consensus process by itself, and we'd be scheduling that. Yeah, so I think there's going to be some natural communication updates that happen, and then each site is on the hook for pieces of this that will be documented in their long-range strategic plan. You'll also consistently hear about it when you go to board luncheons, because it'll be one of the topics that they're sharing out on. In terms of the survey timing, there was a lot of discussion around that, and November was decided as the fall survey date to get new teachers up to speed a little bit, so it's not in the chaos of the first few weeks of school, and then April, so it's after spring break. But it's before the end of the year, and April's a hard time. And so there was an acknowledgement that that's probably an accurate representation of, it's really hard in April. Let's take the pulse on how hard it is. So, yeah.
I guess I meant to say this, but I think this is part of the consensus process, and it happens every time I engage in it, but the trust that existed in that room, the trust that teachers had for administration that we mean this, we're going to address this, we're going to attack this, and we've got this, was another thing that was really stayed with me for a long time. And it takes a minute to develop that trust, and we worked on it for a full day. But I walked away from there knowing that I trust that we heard what the teachers wanted us to hear, and I trust the district that we're going to work on these things, continue to work on these things to address the things that are hard. So anyway, I just needed to put that word out there because it's a big part of what makes that successful in my mind, at least.
Thank you. Did you have more, Kevin, or were you finished?
I think I said it, but thank you guys to you taking the time. I would also just express I do a couple other things where I look for volunteers in a few different committees or things that I'm involved in the community, and I know how challenging it is to find people to volunteer. I would just continue to encourage you guys, and you guys have been a part of many different processes and within our district, and I'm very appreciative of those people stepping up, and I feel like you learn so much more about what's going on in the districts and the why behind those crazy, Casey making these crazy decisions in his little box. It doesn't touch base with anybody. So I would just encourage you guys, because you guys are the voices of seeing the people that you're working with on a day-to-day basis, that and again, I completely get it's hard because I do a lot of asking for volunteers as well. So, but the more that other people can get involved, I think it just helps our culture to continue to understand, like, what is the big deal? Like, why is financing so hard in the district? And why do we have to make cuts and that sort of thing? So, and that's all of us. It's not just you guys, but the more that we can have championing and saying, hey, there's opportunities. Our district does listen to us. We get these groups together. It's definitely, you have to plan for a couple extra days or whatever, but I appreciate you guys having the willingness to do that. And if you guys can just continue to, we'll try, but encourage people to be involved. I see that making us stronger and stronger. So thank you again.
Did you have a rebuttal?
I don't have a rebuttal, but he said that jokingly, but I think that kind of came out in the circle, that there are a lot of people that think that we're kind of like the Wizard of Oz over here behind a screen, and we just make terrible decisions in isolation. And so for some people in the room, it was the first time that they heard that I wasn't even in the guiding coalition at the high schools, right? And so and Pat brought it up. It's sort of this mixed blessing of a consensus-driven district. We share decision-making all the time, which means that for some of these items, I couldn't say yes or no to them. They have to go back to the guiding coalition and to building administration or to a different consensus process, because that's how we operate. And so it's probably less efficient, but far superior. But I think that is a myth out there, that we just sit over here and make decisions all the time. And I kind of pick what I'm going to eat for breakfast, and that's about it.
Well, thank you, everyone. Gary.
I would move the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve the LRSP staff well-being goal and action plan as presented.
Second. Oh.
Motion made by trustee Lucine, seconded by trustee Reinhardt. Is there any public comment? There's no public. Any further discussion, comments? All in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Can I say one more thing real quick before
Yes,
they
you
take
may.
off? Leaving the room after that third day was about the most hopeful I have felt in a really long time. And it was because of the teachers and the staff in the room. David, getting to know you was just incredible. And so, new teachers, I mean, oh my goodness, the joy and enthusiasm and their willingness to butt heads with some of you was just awesome. It was so good. It was so positive. The dynamics and the interactions that were going on in there were just incredible. And everybody there kept the focus on the students and what was going to be best for them. And it was just an incredible experience. So, thanks for letting me be part of it.
Thanks, Tanya. Do any of the four of you have public comment on non-agenda items before you leave? Okay. Thanks for coming. 7.1, Executive Cabinet Reports. Are there any Board of Trustee reports? Gary? Oh, did I skip legislative update?
Quickly, I got invited, Mary Jo and I, to the speech and debate event they had a couple weeks ago for a fundraiser. We were invited by Elizabeth Williamson, former trustee. This is our third year, but it was really good. It was very impressive of how the students, I mean, sophomores and juniors, how confident they are and can express themselves well. So anyway, it was a very fun event. They're going to do it again next year. So stay alert.
Thank you. I apologize. I skipped right over item 5.3, legislative update.
I'll be brief, and I have another executive cabinet topic too. But STARS Act is on the governor's desk to sign this week. You passed an MOU. We're not certain whether the MOU is 100% necessary, but we're erring on the side of caution and ensuring we have an MOU in place for the STARS Act so we can receive those funds in year one. The legislature, I believe, is going to wrap tomorrow or the next day. They're still churning on the property tax relief bill and going back and forth. And I think House Bill 231 ended today in some sort of conference committee assignment. So they're coming to some agreement on property tax relief. And then I think they've already, passed House Bill 2, so they can adjourn at any moment. So I think that'll happen in the next day or two. On another topic, we are sort of increasing our, we don't have any more election presentations, but we're increasing our reach out to local media and trying to get on all the TV stations this week. Our ballots were mailed. Flyers were mailed, but flyers have yet to show up in many homes, and so I think it's a post office issue. We mailed it as nonprofit flyers. It's cheaper to do it that way. That's worked for us for years and years and years, and for whatever reason, it still hasn't arrived to many households. The piece we're particularly concerned about is the building reserve, because there's the offset, and we can't put the offset on the ballot. So that's the piece that I'm trying to share on social media this week, and trying to share in the operational levies sort of speak for themselves. But the building reserve is a big ask, but there's a big offset, and we're trying to get that out. So whatever you can do to reshare those on your social media and have those conversations in the community so that people are aware.
Tanya?
Would you be willing to just shoot us one little blurb that we could just copy and paste onto our social media things?
Yep.
That would be super helpful.
Yeah, I think it goes out tomorrow. If you just share what's on the district, this photo's going out tomorrow with a little blurb on it.
Okay.
Yep.
Because, those are the questions I've gotten too, is on the offset.
Have we contacted Drew, who sits on the foundation board?
No,
in charge of-
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Remind me of that, Desert Mountain Broadcasting, yeah.
Yep. Sandy?
some of them are not shareable. So like on my Facebook, it's not made so that I could just automatically share it on my feed. And I don't know what needs to be done to them, or if it's just my
Ability.
my ability. No, I know how to share things, but, so some of them aren't. So I don't know if we need to check into that, to just make sure that they are shareable.
Okay, I got a little out of order here, but we're kind of wrapping three things up at once. Is there any further legislative update, executive cabinet reports, or board of trustee reports? A little non-conventional, sorry. Okay, seeing none, then we will adjourn. Tanya, congratulations. This is your last meeting.